I am Tamiko Lowry, and this is my journey to triumph. So I had a very interesting childhood. My mom had me at the age of 15. My dad was 17, so they were very young. We lived in the projects. So we were very, I guess you can say it was poverty. We lived in the projects. But I was raised by my grandmother, and the interesting thing about that is, although my mom was in the house, I kind of thought she was my sister because we were so close in age. There were about 7 of us in the household. My grandmother had 7 other children. And I looked at my aunts and uncles as my brothers and sisters. And so being raised by my grandmother, though, she was a very, very outgoing, free-spirited, very funny person, loved to dance. And so I kind of picked up her habits, right? So the way that she is in life, that's the way that I am. And so she taught me to be a free-spirited person, to really always stand in my truth. And it didn't matter what other people thought about you. And that's how she lived her life. And that's what she taught me. My mom had me at 15. And it impacted me in a way that I didn't even realize. I didn't even know what a generational curse was. Growing up with a mother who was very young, she wasn't present all the time as a mother figure. I called her by her first name, and I called my grandmother Mom, or I called her Mama because that's who I knew was Mom. But again, growing up in that environment, I kind of took on some of those same things. And so I ended up having my first child at the age of 17, kind of following in my mom's footsteps. So being a teen mom, it was very interesting. It impacted a lot of things for me, the way that I had to navigate through life. I remember I was running for Miss Teen USA, or actually Miss Teen New York. So I used to do these beauty pageants. Like, my mom always wanted me to do these beauty pageants, and I had to be extremely poised. And so when I got pregnant, it wasn't a good thing, obviously. I was running for Miss Teen USA, and I think the most disappointing thing for me was that I had to step down from the pageant because they felt like, a young girl being a teen mom, that wasn't a good representation of what a teenager should have to be like. And so I had to step down from that. And I remember my mom was like, you need to get on the phone, and I want you to call all your sponsors, and you need to call your aunt, and you need to, like, there was this lodge that was like sponsoring me, and I had to literally get on the phone and call all these people and say, I'm sorry, I know you invested this money in me, but I have to step down from this pageant because I'm pregnant. Like, it was devastating. It was embarrassing for me to have to share that, and because I had all these people that looked up to me. I had all these people counting on me, especially a black girl from the hood. I'm about to run for Miss Teen USA. So it was a disappointment to a lot of people. But the other thing about that, it forced me to have this attitude, like this go-getter, this go for it type of attitude, this mentality, because I didn't want to be a statistic. Because typically you see teenage moms, they drop out of school, they don't go to college, they end up on welfare. Like, I didn't want that to be me. So yeah, it was probably a bad thing that I was 17 years old in high school and pregnant, but it forced me to create all of these goals. And so I was determined not to drop out of school. So I'm in school, my junior year of high school. I was pregnant, had my daughter, ended up taking these summer school classes, and then I went right back to school that following year and finished my senior year. And I just remember standing on stage, getting my high school diploma, and my daughter, who was, I think she had already turned 1 year old, was sitting in the audience, like, you know what I'm saying, with my parents, while I'm up here getting my diploma. So I was determined to make sure that I finished school. And then shortly after that, went on to college, did a couple of semesters, and I ended up dropping out because I didn't have a babysitter. I would have her on campus with me and things of that nature. But it still pushed me to be a better person. Again, I refuse to be a statistic. And so everything that I did in life, I feel like it was because I didn't want people to look down on me to be that statistic. Right? So I ended up eventually finishing college, getting a bachelor's degree, and then later on getting a master's. So it really forced me to be a better person. It forced me to be responsible. Like literally growing up, when all my friends would be at the club partying, I was at home with the baby. So it forced me to grow up very, very quickly and be very responsible. So, you know, when I think about being a teen mom and all of the emotions and, you know, all of the difficulties that I had, you know, I talked about not being able to hang out with my friends because I had a child. People looking at me funny, like, oh, she's another statistic. You know, I talk about not wanting to be a statistic, but I actually was. And people looking at me a certain way, like, oh, she's another black girl that's a teen mom, right? Having to be on Medicaid, the things that I didn't want to have to do. Going down to I think we called it the welfare building back then. I don't know what it's called now, but going down there to get my food stamps. And, you know, there is a stigma attached to it. And people would be like, oh, wow, she just like her mother. You just like your mother, you know. And those things can be very hurtful, which is why I talked about not wanting to be that statistic and just really working hard. I went to a predominantly white high school, and so then to be the black girl on campus that got pregnant, again, I'm another statistic. And so I felt like I was always trying to prove myself that I was better than what people really thought I was. And so, you know, in addition to it pushing me to be a better person, there was that downside, you know. Again, not being able to hang out with your friends and just not knowing what life is going to throw at you. I was a single parent at 17 years old. I was dating the high school star football player. So back then, like, that was just the thing. Like, I grew up north, so the star football player at a high school, like, I'm rocking his jersey, I'm rocking his gold chain, like, you couldn't tell me nothing. And then I end up getting pregnant. One of the things that I think is very important for me to add about this particular relationship is that it was toxic. It was very abusive. It wasn't like, oh, you know, I had it going on. He was the high school football player, and I talked about, you know, rocking the jersey and the gold chain. There was some other stuff that came along with that. He was very controlling, and at the time I didn't know what it meant. I thought it was cute. Oh, he's controlling. He don't want me to hang with this person. Oh, he loves me. You know, if I wasn't wearing his jersey, there was an issue. So there was a reason why I was rocking that jersey, because if I didn't, there was an issue, because that was his way of letting people know, oh, that's mine. And I remember wanting to break up with him and him telling me that he would commit suicide. And so I stayed with him because I thought, if this man, you know, if this guy commits suicide, it's going to be my fault. But at that time, me not realizing this is a form of abuse. Control, the manipulation, keeping me from hanging with my friends, controlling the way that I dressed, you know, the threats. I know now, but back then I didn't know that was a form of abuse. And I remember getting pregnant when I got pregnant, and he was like, oh, you're gonna have my baby. And I had his baby. And so that's kind of the backstory to that. So I don't want people to think, you know, it was all glamorous and, oh, she was wearing the gold chain. Well, no, you know, there was other things that came along with that. So it wasn't all, you know, roses. And that was my first abusive relationship. So I know I've talked a lot about generational curses, but oftentimes when we understand those generational curses, we understand ourselves a little bit more. And one of the things that I realized about my family is that there were two things that were very, very prominent, which was alcoholism and domestic abuse. My family is one of those families that we love to party, we love to have a good time. But even in those hard times, instead of us maybe going to therapy or counseling or seeking some type of emotional support, we typically turn to alcoholism, right? So it's like, oh, you're going through something, let's go have a drink, let's go have some shots, let's go, it's all about drinking your pain away. And when I think about the people in my family, from my great-grandparents to my grandmother and to my dad, on my maternal side and paternal side, there was just a lot of alcoholism. And most people who died, like, they passed away from liver disease. And me seeing that was something that I didn't want to experience. So I feel like I was able to kind of break that curse as far as alcoholism. I like my glasses of wine, though, I'm not gonna lie. But, within reason. But the other thing is the domestic abuse. And it wasn't until I went through my own personal experience with domestic abuse that I realized that it was a generational curse. A few years ago, I wrote my first book. It's called Wounds to Wisdom, I'm Still Standing. And as I was writing that book, in order to understand where I was at that time in my life, I literally had to go all the way back to the beginning. And so I interviewed family members. I interviewed my mother. I interviewed my grandmother, my aunts, and my uncles. Because I wanted to know, like, how did I get to this place? Because I said this would never be me, so how did I get here? And through that process of writing that book, I realized that from generations ago, everybody was abused. From my grandmother, my great-grandmother. My mother was abused, and she was in several different abusive relationships. And thinking back on that, I never even knew what a healthy relationship looked like. So how could I be in a healthy relationship, but I don't even know what a healthy relationship looks like? And then the other thing for me is I crave to be daddy's girl, right? He wasn't in my life a lot. We lived in the same city, but I hardly ever saw him. Maybe on my birthday, I was that kid that would be sitting outside on the stoop, waiting for daddy to pick me up, and he wouldn't show up. So I always had this yearning to be daddy's girl. And what I realized is that the type of men that I picked, they were very either narcissistic, they were very controlling. They possessed something that I didn't have. And so it's almost like I was looking for a father figure in those relationships. Having that yearning to be a daddy's girl, it caused me to look for love in all the wrong places. And so mostly every relationship, that person was like a father figure to me. From scolding me, telling me what to do, choosing my friends, just the whole power and control thing. I didn't recognize that, but I was looking for a father figure because I wanted to be daddy's girl. I wanted to be daddy's little girl. Well, I confuse love, or I confuse abuse and control and power with love. And so if you weren't controlling me to a certain extent, then that meant that you didn't love me. At least that's what I thought. That's the way I looked at it. Even in the relationship I talked about in high school, he was controlling. He took care of me. Not only was he the high school athlete, but he was the neighborhood drug dealer. And so because we were poor, I had the fresh Jordans all the time. Like, he literally took care of me, made sure I ate good. And so again, looking for love in all the wrong places. And I also often say this to people. When I look back at all of the relationships I've ever been in, there was a pattern. Same person, different face. Same person, different face. What do I mean by that? Same personality, same controlling ways. Just had a different face. I've always been one of those people who was always in search of truth, always in search of meaning. I'm a very inquisitive person. I grew up Baptist, got up every Sunday morning. My mother didn't go to church, so by this point, so now I'm at a point in my life where I'm living with my mom. I didn't start living with her until I was about 7 or 8 years old, around that time. But I remember getting up every Sunday morning, going to Sunday school. She would put me on that little bus and they would take me off to Sunday school while she was still at home. And I know all of the Sunday school Bible verses. I could still recite the songs, Father Abraham, and all those songs that we used to sing. So I grew up Baptist. But when I became a teenager, I had more questions. And I would say stuff like, well, why do y'all have this picture of this white man on the wall? Like, well, who is this white Jesus, right? And so if you know anything about, growing up north, upstate New York State, it's really heavy with the 5 percenters, 5% Nation of Islam. And so that became very attractive to me because it was very militant. They were reciting these I forget what they call it, but they would recite these verses, and I was like, yo, that's dope, right? And so I got interested in that, and so at the age of 18, I ended up joining the Nation of Islam, which was under the leadership of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And I still remember, some of the things that we had to recite, like, who is the original man? The original man is the Asiatic black man, the maker, the owner, the cream of the planet Earth, God of the universe. I still remember that. We were forced to actually remember all of these. That's what it was called. It was called the lessons. And there was all these lessons. It was militant. And the men that were a part of the nation, they were so disciplined. There was just something about them. And so that's what attracted me to it. It was the discipline. But then it was too disciplined because then I couldn't dress the way I wanted to dress. I was like, I don't want to be all wrapped up and stuff. I'm 18 years old. I want to wear my little poom shorts. And I kept getting in trouble. And they'd be like, we saw Tamiko at the barbecue with her poom shorts. And I always got in trouble. So I was like, okay, this is not going to work. So I go back to Christianity. So now I'm back in church and I'm praising them and I'm playing the tambourine and I'm in the choir and I'm the best praise dancer. I'm talking about I can praise dance you to heaven. I can get up in front of you and I can dance you to the Holy Ghost until you have just, all your sins are probably forgiven. So I'm back into Christianity at this point, and, I've been following that for years. But what I had realized as I've gotten older, that I didn't really want to follow religion. So then I had this thing called church hurt. And I was married to an abuser, and I'm kind of skipping over my story a little bit just to kind of talk about this religious piece. And I remember wanting to get out of this abusive relationship, and I go to the church, and I'm like, my husband's been beating me. I need help. I need to escape this relationship. I need y'all help. And they called him in, and they called us into counseling. Wrong thing to do, to have an abuser and the victim in counseling together, because now we get home and he's like, oh, you telling people what's happening? So now I'm really in trouble. And every time I went to the church for help, I felt like, let's just pray. We're going to pray over you. We're going to pray over your marriage. And I was like, I know God don't want me to be in this relationship and I'm hurting. So now I'm experiencing church hurt. So I quit the church again. I was like, I'm not going back to church. But what I realized is there's a difference between spirituality and religion. And so one of the things that I've decided for my personal life is I don't want to be religious, right? I have a relationship with God. I don't want to be religious, but I'm more in a space now where I'm spiritual. And I've tapped into my spiritual gifts that I have as well. And so just going through those different religions has gotten me to a place where I understand spirituality more than organized religion per se. Not saying that a church or anything is bad. I'm just in a space where I understand spirituality a little bit better. And so where I am right now as a spiritual being, because I believe that we're all spiritual beings, and where I am now as a spiritual being, I'm at a place of freedom. I felt like being in, so I'm gonna use the word religious because that's something that's kind of organized and whatever. So I felt like I was bound, like I was kind of stuck and I wasn't moving forward. And now that I understand my personal spirituality more and I've tapped into who I am as a person, and I have my relationship and I have the way that, I do my spirituality, again, I feel like I'm in a space where there's more freedom. I feel like I'm in a space where my blessings are actually flowing. I feel like my blessings are flowing in a way that I've never ever experienced it before. And not only that, I'm able to bless other people. Having the freedom. So there's this quote that I like, and it's called, "Be who you were created to be, and you will set the world on fire." Understanding that I'm a spiritual being, and my light shines so bright that I can help other people. It's almost like it helps me through this healing process. Like it's helped me to heal myself, and it's helping me to be able to help other people to heal through their journeys. I'm a firm believer that the things that we go through in life are not often, it's not ever for us, right? It's for someone else. And we often wonder why. Why did I have to experience teenage pregnancy? Why were my family alcoholics? Why did I go through domestic abuse? Why did I go through sexual assault? And I believe that we're all on this earth for a specific purpose. So you've heard all of the things I've experienced. Everything from being born to teenage parents. There was alcoholism, me being a teenage parent myself, being in a toxic, abusive relationship as a teenager. One of the things I haven't shared yet is being, and I don't like to use the word victim, but I was a victim of sexual assault. And there's a stigma that goes along with that. What makes you feel like you're unclean. You often ask yourself, what did I do to deserve this? This happened, I was about 20 years old, and out at this nightclub with a really good male friend of mine. It was me, my female cousin, and a really close male friend of mine who I looked at him like a cousin. We were out that night having a good time, we were drinking. And then it was time to go home, and he dropped my cousin off first. And we lived in the same neighborhood, so he's like, "Tamiko, I'm gonna drop you off on my way, on the way home since you live closer to me." And I remember being in the front seat of the car and him like rubbing my leg, and I was like, moving his hand, like, "What are you doing? Don't do that." He like, "Oh, you shouldn't be so pretty. You shouldn't be so pretty." So we get to this stop sign, and I'm trying to open the doors, and he locked the doors, and we ended up in like this alleyway, and I just remember fighting him, and I guess I didn't, to me, I thought maybe I didn't fight him long enough or hard enough. But going through that experience and having people victim blame, well, what was you doing out with him? Oh, you had on that little half shirt. It's very hurtful because at the end of the day, you really think, did I deserve this? And I remember the one thing that kept sticking in my head, and I kept saying, "Why are you doing this to me?" And he kept saying, "You shouldn't be so pretty." So that took me on a whole nother direction in life where I was like, I tried to dumb down the way that I looked. And I always had very long hair, and I remember cutting my hair off real short, curly afro. Didn't want to wear makeup. I just wanted to be plain. I tried to dumb down my beauty, I guess you can say that, because I felt like that was the reason why that happened to me. Overcoming something like that, I think it's a lifelong journey. Healing is a lifelong journey. Even talking about it right now, I'm getting a little bit choked up because I know that there is someone else out there that experiences the same, that has experienced the same thing or will experience it. In the society that we live in, we often victim blame, so people don't come forward. So, yeah, sometimes I feel like I have healed through that. But then there are times where, like today, I'm sharing this story and I'm reliving it, and it hurts. And I don't think I'm hurting for myself. I think I hurt for the other people who have to experience something like this, and you're made to feel like it's your fault. And it's not. So that was something else traumatic that I had to experience in life. And again, I used to always say, why me? But why not you, Tamiko? Because you can be a voice for the voiceless. So, I've shared all these stories. You would be like, okay, is that it? But that's not it. So, growing up in Buffalo, New York, after this sexual assault happened, I was like, I gotta get out of here. Like, I just wanna start a new life, right? At this point, I'm like 21, 22 years old. It's the late 90s. My dad was living in Atlanta, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna move to Atlanta and start my life over. So I'm thinking, I'm gonna go to Atlanta, it's gonna be the bomb, Black people doing good in Atlanta. And I get here, and it was great. Atlanta is Atlanta. And I went through a series of different relationships. Remember I said, same guy, different face, right? So that's when that was happening. Same guy, different face, these toxic relationships that were controlling. At this point, I have 2 kids now. So I'm in Atlanta with my 2 babies. I'm a single parent. And do y'all remember, I think it was called Black Planet. It was like a dating site. I want to say it was called blackplanet.com. It's like the early 2000s. So everybody's on Black Planet. Everybody like meeting their so-called soulmates. I was like, oh, I want to meet somebody. I want a soulmate. So I go on Black Planet and I set up my little profile. Within 24 hours, this guy hits me up. I'm like, okay, he's kind of cute. He's handsome. And we go on this date. We have a great time, and he's like really charming. And so I'm like, I met somebody. I think I met the man in my dreams. Right? He's literally was the epitome of tall, dark, and handsome. Tall, bald, handsome, nice teeth, something about those teeth. Nice smile, very charming. And I'm like, I met the man in my dreams. And it was like maybe a year or so later, I realized that dream became my worst nightmare. Things moved very fast. We met, we went on a couple of dates. He was like, in my prayer time, God told me I was supposed to take care of you and your kids. I'm like, oh, I hit the jackpot. He wanted to take care of me. He said I could be a stay-at-home wife. I'm thinking that this is it. I hit the jackpot. But like I said, that the man of my dreams became my worst nightmare. We got married in less than a year. And I often say, like, he began to really tear me down little by little. Tell me wasn't nobody gonna ever want me because I was a single parent with 2 kids, so I was stuck with him. Oh, you're not all that. Like, literally tear down my self-esteem. And I say, I often say that he would beat me with words. There was some financial abuse because, again, he was like, you don't have to work. You could be a stay-at-home wife. So I'm confusing love. I'm confusing the controlling aspect with love. And before he ever laid a hand on me, I was already what I would call a broken soul. How do you heal a broken soul? When you think about physical abuse, yeah, you can heal, a broken arm or black eye. That stuff heals over time. But how do you heal a broken soul? I was a broken soul. Everything in me was just completely broken. I didn't even know who I was anymore. I didn't know what my favorite food was. I didn't know how to choose my own hairstyle, my own clothing. And then one day I got tired. And I said, I'm leaving. And I remember packing up their clothing and sending them back up north for the summer, because I was like, when they get back, I'm gonna be in my own space, in my own home. At this point, I had started, I'm gonna say he allowed me to become a real estate agent. So I had started selling real estate, and I remember he went on a work trip, and I was like, okay, while he's on this work trip, I'm gonna pack my stuff and I'm gonna leave. So he calls me that day and said, I'm home early, come pick me up from the airport. And so instead of me not listening, I was like, you know what? Instead of me not going with my gut instinct to not pick him up, I was like, you know what? Let me do the right thing. That is my husband. I'm gonna pick him up from the airport, and I'm gonna let him know that I'm leaving. So I pick him up from the airport, and he's like, oh, what's all this stuff in the back seat? And it was my suitcases. I was like, I'm leaving you. I'm tired. Now, mind you, before all of this, he had never physically punched me or anything, but he would strangle me from time to time. He would kind of shove me every now and then. So this particular day, I was like, I'm leaving. And I'm in the driver's seat. I'm driving up Interstate 85 near the airport. And he looked at me and he said, bitch, if you leave me, I'm gonna kill both of us. And at that point, he tried to take control of the steering wheel to cause us to go into an accident, and we ended up on the side of the road. And that's when he began to beat me and punch me and strangle me until I was unconscious. When I came back to consciousness, I was literally in the middle of Interstate 85, and all I heard was beep, beep, and cars swerving around me trying not to hit me. Then I heard a voice in the background saying, get your ass over here in this car and let's go home. And I stood up, and there was a couple. There was a man and a woman on the side of the road parked behind our vehicle. And they said, ma'am, the police are on our way. We saw everything. We called the police. The police came and they arrested him. And that was the day that I became a survivor. That was the day that my life changed. One thing I wanted to share is that when you think about domestic abuse, we often say, well, why did she stay? Why did she stay? Or why did he stay? Why did they stay? Why don't they just leave? Well, you heard me talk about the self-esteem piece. Sometimes you feel like you deserve it. Like, I was at a point where I felt like I deserved it. I was like, dang, I can't do nothing right. And at the end of the day, you don't really want to lose your spouse. You don't want to lose your family. You just want the abuse to stop. And that's all I ever wanted. They call it the honeymoon stage. All I wanted was us to get back to the honeymoon stage the way it was when we first met. And that's what happens in most abusive relationships. You want to get back to that honeymoon stage. The other thing is that person might be fearful for their life. Maybe they don't have any family. They don't have anywhere to go. We always say, why did she stay? But we don't say, why does he hit? So at some point, we have to stop re-victimizing the victim and hold the abuser accountable. That was one of the things that I learned along this journey, is that we gotta hold people accountable and stop re-victimizing victims. There were times in that relationship where I thought he was gonna kill me. We had a gun in the house and he would clean it in front of me, just let me know, I got this gun. He would clean it. So there was a lot of fear. I ain't have any money. I was a stay-at-home wife. Where was I going? My best friend was like, you can't come over here because I don't want him to come over here messing with my family. So before you ask, why does that person stay? They must like it. That's not the reason. But what we should be asking is, why does that person hit, and hold them accountable. One of the things I learned on this journey of triumph is to love myself more, to know my worth, to understand what I value. I think in life, and this is with anything, if you don't understand your values and what's important to you, anything that you do in life that's not in alignment with your values is not going to be right. I don't care if it's work, if it's a relationship, friendships. If it doesn't align with your values, then you're going to have a problem. And so one of the things I learned on my healing journey is the importance of understanding my values. Some of us don't even know what we value. We think it's material things. But what are your core values? And so those are some of the things that I had to learn. What are my core values? Right? I value freedom. Right? I like to be free. I'm a free spirit. I love to travel. I love to have fun. But the other thing I learned on this journey is life purpose. And earlier I talked about how things happen to us, but it's not always for us, it's for someone else. And one of the things that I get to do every single day is help men and women heal from their trauma, right? I am a trauma recovery healing coach. And so I get to use my experience and my gifts to help other people heal from this type of trauma. There's a scripture in the Bible that's Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good of them that love the Lord, who are called according to his purpose, right? All things, not the good, or not just the good things, but the bad things too are a part of your life purpose. And so I've gained my values from this. I understand what my life purpose is. And so I'm just on this journey to empower other people, to help people to heal from their past trauma, help them to do the work, because you got to do the work. And that's where I am today. I'm in this space where I get to travel the world and help people heal from their trauma and have their breakthroughs because of everything that I've gone through. You know, they say there are 2 days in your life, two important days in your life, the day you were born and the day that you discover your life purpose. And the day that I was on Interstate 85 unconscious, well, when I came back to consciousness, that was the day that I actually discovered my life purpose. Because I said, if I get through this, I will advocate on behalf of victims of domestic violence and sexual assault for the rest of my life. Like, this is what I'm gonna do. And I've been living that since that happened in 2007. And now we're in 2024. Since then, the first thing I did was launch a nonprofit organization called the Still Standing Alliance. The Still Standing Alliance focuses on domestic violence advocacy, awareness, and prevention. So that was the first thing that I did to actually be able to help people who are experiencing abuse and sexual assault. I didn't know what I was doing, y'all. Let me tell you. When you take the first step, the help is gonna come. People are like, I wanna launch a nonprofit, I wanna start a business. You gotta take the first step. You're talking about a little girl from the hood that grew up in the projects, was able to launch a nonprofit and help hundreds and hundreds of people on an international level. And I'm not bragging, I'm just saying, when you follow your purpose, you're able to help so many people. So I launched a nonprofit organization. Then I wrote a book, y'all. Wounds to Wisdom, I'm Still Standing. That was the first book I wrote because I wanted to share my story, to really just to be a blessing to other people. So the book served as a product of healing for me because I was writing and I was going through that healing process. But at the same time, it blessed so many people. Here's the thing. I was afraid to launch this book. I wrote the book, set it on the shelf for about 2 years. And then it just kept, I remember sitting in church on a Sunday. And what's the scripture I talked about earlier, Romans 8:28, and the pastor was preaching from that scripture. And he said something like, he said something about your life purpose and your story matters. And then that's when I knew it was time for me to release the book. But I was like, who's gonna buy this book? Don't nobody know me. I have this book signing, I order 100 books, the books sell out at the book signing. I'm like, who the heck are all these people? They sold out at the book signing. 3 months later, Amazon #1 bestseller. The girl from the hood that grew up in the projects, who had parents that were 15 and 17 when they had me. The teenage mother wrote a book that became an Amazon #1 bestseller. So there are just so many things that have happened since I've embraced my purpose, right? The nonprofit, writing books, starting multiple businesses that all focus on helping people. Notice everything is about giving those gifts and my experiences to other people to help them, because at the end of the day, I think that's what we're called to do. I'm gonna just be honest, sometimes it's very difficult for me to talk about myself. But I have been able to accomplish a lot of things since I've gone through that healing process, since I've embraced my purpose. I shared about the books and all that stuff. But this year particularly has been, well, not this year, but 2023, 2022, those years during the pandemic, they've been really amazing. I was honored with an honorary doctorate's degree. So I have an honorary doctorate, I'm a doctor of humanitarianism. And so that degree was because of the work and the humanitarian work that I've done over the course of the past 10 years or more. On an international level, being able to impact people in countries like the United Kingdom. I've done work in the Bahamas. And so this school and organization thought that I was worthy of having this honorary doctorate degree. And the powerful thing about that is, remember I told you guys that I was pregnant in high school, but I didn't get to the part where I tried to go to college, but it was difficult, so I dropped out because I had to take my daughter to school with me every day, and it was very difficult. So I ended up dropping out of college, and years later I got my degree online, never walked across the stage. So that was a very profound moment for me to actually be able to walk across the stage with an honorary doctorate in my hand. Like, I just remember crying. It meant a lot to me because I got that opportunity to walk. But I think the biggest accomplishment, and I don't want to call it an accomplishment, but the biggest honor that I got was from President Biden, from the White House. I received the Lifetime Achievement Award, and that award only goes to people who have done over 5,000 hours of community service in the community, who have been doing the work for over 10 years. There was all these background checks and reference checks, and to get a letter from President Biden that says, "I'm proud of your accomplishments," and this beautiful certificate and this award and this little pin that I often wear, it says the Lifetime Achievement Award from President Biden. My name is forever archived in the White House. So when y'all go to the White House, they have like these archive files and stuff. My name is in there. Like, again, I always reference the girl from the hood. I tell y'all I used to fight. I used to get in fights all the time too. The girl that used to be fighting with the pink Timberlands on. But yeah, I'm still in awe about that. Like, I got an award from the president. That's crazy. So again, when you embrace who you are, like the quote says, be who you were created to be and you will set the world on fire. Like, you literally get to set the world on fire in a good way. It's January. January is also known as National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And I was reminded of this young lady that came to me some years ago. Thought she was a domestic violence victim. She said, "I'm a victim of domestic violence. I need help. I want out of this relationship." And I remember helping her. We had her in a hotel for a couple of days, and I said, "What is it that you want to do? Like, what is your plan? What is it that you ultimately want?" And she said, "I want to go home and be with my family." She said, "I was taken from Chicago, Illinois 5 years ago and sold into sex trafficking here in Atlanta." She said, when I called you and said it was domestic violence, I was actually running away from my pimp. We bought her a one-way ticket to Chicago. And her life has not been the same since, meaning in a good way. She had children. She was reunited with her children, with her family. And every single year on that day, she sends me an email or a DM on social media and says, Tamiko, this is the day that you saved my life. Like, whew. And then there's this other young lady, working with her through my nonprofit organization. I asked her what she wanted to do. You've escaped your abuser. What do you want to do now? She said, I want to go to Mexico. And I remember my organization not having the funds to actually send her to Mexico. And I was like, what you going to do in Mexico? And she had this whole plan out, went into my own personal bank account and bought her a ticket to Mexico. And this was 4 years ago. She's still there. She has her own business, and guess what she's doing? She's coaching women who have gone through domestic violence and helping them to actually heal. So now she has a trauma-informed practice. And so it's like a trickle-down effect. And she was like, because you believed in me, I believe in me, and now I get to help other women. And we reconnected recently on a trip. I did a retreat, the Divine Empowerment Retreat recently in Tulum, Mexico, and me and her were able to reunite. And we're going to be doing some work together. So the person that I was able to help, she's helping people, and now we're going to help a lot of people together in that area in Mexico, in Tulum, Mexico, because it's an area that's underserved. You've learned a lot about me at this point. Out of everything that I've experienced in life, I want to share, like, one of my biggest lessons is to always be true to yourself and to always listen to your gut, your intuition, your Holy Spirit, whatever it is that you call it, listen to it, because it's speaking to you, it's telling you what to do. So that's one of the things I've learned, is to listen to my gut, to listen to my intuition. But not only that, is to be my most authentic self. And in this season of my life, I think I am the most authentic that I've ever been. And I'm the most free that I've ever been. And free, not meaning like, oh, I'm just running around doing stuff. Free meaning free to be me, free to serve who I'm supposed to serve, free to live in my purpose the way I'm supposed to live in my purpose. And as I move forward in life, my goal is to continue to be authentic, to walk in my authentic power, because I want to encourage other men and women. And I always add men in there too, because I don't want to, because I've dealt with domestic violence, I don't want people to feel like, oh, you know, she's male bashing. I don't ever want people to feel that way. We all need healing. And so I encourage all women and all men to walk in your authentic power, be who you were created to be. So some of the things that I've realized about myself is I love nature. I love to be by the water. And so moving forward over the course of the next few months, I'm actually preparing to transition to another country. You heard me talk about Tulum, Mexico, and I've visited there for the past year. I've gone about 4 or 5 times, probably more than that. And it feels like home to me. There's something that's very spiritual about it. There's something that's very calming, very peaceful. There's this serenity that I love. And I just feel like I'm called to that area. I know there's a lot of healing that needs to be done. And so I'm just looking forward to the new beginnings of being who Tamiko really is, shedding the layers, shedding the person that everybody else thought that I should be, and walking fully in my authentic power, so that I can tap into some other things and help so many more people. So I'm really, really excited about that. But as I close out, I just want you to know that you have a life purpose, and that purpose probably has something to do with some of the things that you've experienced in the past. But just remember that it's not all, your purpose is not about you, it's about those people that you're called to serve. And oftentimes people always say, well, what does success look like to you, Tamiko? What does success look like to you? To me, Success, again, is walking in my authentic power, but success is being able to touch and reach the people that I'm called to touch. And I can only do that when I'm being authentic to myself. No matter what it is you've gone through in life, just always understand that that is your journey to triumph.